Hi, this story is probably one that you have heard in grade school. The story of the Star-Spangled Banner, our national anthem. The roots of our country were for freedom, and people had to fight for our freedom. And we need to remember that we enjoy the things that we have today because of people giving their lives for our country and for all of us to enjoy the freedoms that we have. So let's get a little patriotic, listen to the story and the story behind the story. And my name is Lori Coyne, and this is The Story Behind the Story. Before I begin, I want to mention my sponsor, Hollyweird.shop.
Check out Hollyweird.shop, where the obscure, cult classics and the bizarre collide. From wearable collectibles to one-of-a-kind apparel, they've got the perfect items for the true movie fan. Dare to be different and unleash your weird. Hollyweird.shop unveils new designs every week and is now offering great shipping deals. Stand out, creep out, and wear your weird. Shop now at Hollyweird.shop.
It was a night of fire and fury, the kind of night that changes the course of history. The year was 1814, and the place, a British warship in the Chesapeake Bay. On board, a handful of American men were held in uneasy captivity, their fate uncertain. Outside, the darkness was shattered by relentless flashes of cannon fire as British forces rained destruction upon Fort McHenry, the strategic stronghold guarding Baltimore Harbor. The War of 1812 was nearing its climax. For over 2 years, the United States had been locked in a bitter struggle against Great Britain. The young republic, barely 3 decades old, had dared to challenge the might of the world's most powerful navy. In retaliation, the British had burned Washington, D.C., reducing the White House and the Capitol to smoldering ruins. Now, their warships had turned their sights on Baltimore, a critical city in the war effort. If it fell, the path to conquering the mid-Atlantic would be wide open. On board that ship, helplessly watching the battle unfold, stood a man named Francis Scott Key. But Key was no soldier. He was a lawyer, a respected but otherwise unremarkable attorney from Georgetown, known more for his courtroom arguments than for any military skill. He had come on board under a flag of truce carrying out a delicate mission, securing the release of Dr. William Beans, an elderly physician who had been captured by the British. Key's negotiations had succeeded and Beans was granted his freedom, but there was a problem. The British, knowing that their American guests had overheard their battle plans, could not risk letting them leave just yet. And so Key and his companions found themselves detained, not as prisoners, but as witnesses forced to watch the assault unfold from their captor's ship. Hour after hour, the bombardment continued. The British unleashed everything they had: Congreve rockets, powerful mortars, and shells that arced through the night sky before exploding in midair, raining fire upon the fort below. The attack was unrelenting. More than 1,500 bombs were hurled at Fort McHenry. Every explosion sent shockwaves across the harbor. Smoke billowed, fire blazed, and debris scattered into the dark waters. From the ship's deck, Key strained his eyes toward the fort, desperately searching for a sign, any sign, that the American defenses still held. He saw the flag, a massive banner, 30 feet high, 42 feet wide, commissioned specifically to be so large that the British would have no doubt that they were attacking American soil. By the glare of exploding shells, Key could see it, waving defiantly in the night sky. But how long could it last? If the flag fell, it would mean that Fort McHenry had fallen. If Fort McHenry fell, Baltimore would fall. And if Baltimore fell, well, that might just spell the beginning of the end for the young United States. For 25 agonizing hours, the assault raged on. Then just before dawn, silence. The bombardment stopped. The British had fired their last shot. Key waited, his heart pounding. The only question that mattered now was the flag still there? As the mist cleared and the sun's first golden light stretched across the water, he could just barely make out something on the distant shore. Torn, battered, riddled with holes from the relentless attack, but still flying, still standing, a stubborn emblem of survival. Key felt a wave of relief so overwhelming that he could hardly contain himself. Overcome with emotion, he grabbed an envelope from his pocket, the only paper he had, and began scribbling down the words that flooded his mind. "Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light?" He could barely believe it himself. Against all odds, the Americans had held their ground. The British, having failed to break the fort's defenses, had no choice but to withdraw. Baltimore was safe, the country still standing. The war would continue for a few more months, but in that moment, Francis Scott Key knew America had survived the night. What he didn't know was what would become of his words. Now, what happened next is where the story takes a most unexpected turn. Key's lines, those hastily scribbled verses, were never intended to be an anthem. They weren't even meant for public reading. He completed the poem a few days later and shared it with a few close friends. Someone suggested setting it to a popular English tune, to Anacreon in Heaven. Hopefully I pronounced that right. A song originally written as a drinking ballad for a gentleman's music club in London. With its stirring melody and patriotic theme, Key's song spread like wildfire. It was printed in newspapers. It was sung at patriotic gatherings. It became the song of the American spirit. But it wasn't yet the national anthem. For more than a century, the Star-Spangled Banner remained a beloved patriotic tune, but no more official than any other wartime hymn. That changed in 1918. A World Series game was being played at Comiskey Park in Chicago. The country was in the throes of World War I, and thousands of American soldiers were fighting overseas. As a tribute, the military band began playing Key's song, and something remarkable happened. The crowd, tens of thousands of fans, stood. They removed their hats. The players on the field stopped. Many placed their hands over their hearts, and some saluted. For the first time at that moment, the Star-Spangled Banner wasn't just a song. It was a solemn tribute to the country, to its flag, to the men and women who had fought for it. From that day forward, the song became a staple at sporting events and patriotic ceremonies. And yet it still wasn't official. It took another 13 years of lobbying before Congress passed a resolution, and on March 3rd, in 1931, President Herbert Hoover signed it into law. At last, the Star-Spangled Banner was officially declared the national anthem of the United States. And to think, it all began with a poem scribbled on the back of an envelope, a poem never meant to be an anthem, a poem inspired by a night of fire and fury, a poem that captured the spirit of a nation that refused to fall. And now you know the story behind the story.